All right, so today I want to explain and discuss first and foremost how to complete the seller's disclosure statement. But first, let's talk about why the seller's disclosure statement is important. So, when you're selling your home, and it may vary based on what state you're in, but here in Michigan, a seller's disclosure statement is required by any seller selling a property to a potential buyer. And the importance of this is basically you're giving knowledge to the buyer as to the condition and the history of that property. So this form actually helps prevent a lot of lawsuits, but it can also end up in lawsuits if the seller is lying. But ultimately, it will protect you if you disclose all the information that you know about the property. The issue becomes when maybe there's something that you didn't know about the property, and the buyer assumes that you were not being truthful, and they have to prove that you were actually lying about whatever the condition of the property was on this form. So let's look at this section by section. So it's pretty simple, but sometimes the way it's worded can pretty much be confusing. So let's take a look here. The way I like to explain this is that if it says yes, that means it's working, it's in working condition, and it's also included in the property or the sale of the property. So, for example, it asks about the range and the oven. If it works and it's included in the sale, you want to check yes. If it's not going to be a part of the sales transaction, you would just simply check not available. Even though you have a working range and oven in your property, that doesn't mean it's included as part of the sale. So there's no need to include that information on the seller's disclosure statement. But let's take a look here. Now, I want to say this. Going over this form, if you have any questions, please consult with your realtor or your attorney, because some people are selling homes for sale by owner. I highly recommend that you have a full understanding of this form, especially if you're selling your home for sale by owner. So back to the form. Let's go through the section. So the first section here is appliance systems and services. So they're asking questions about the dishwasher, refrigerator, the hood fan, disposal, TV antennas. Who has TV antennas anymore? Maybe there's a on it or HBO TV antenna. This was predating cable, but people used to have those antennas or any type of rotor antenna. But there's still other type of TV antenna devices that we have nowadays. But if it's included in the sale and it works, you want to check yes. No, if it doesn't work or the item is in non-working order. Unknown if you're not for sure, and then not available, meaning that it's not part of the property or not included in the sale. So you're going to see things like pool, the water, the pool heater, equipment to the pool, microwave, trash compactor, washer, dryer, sump pump is a big one here. Um, if your city water system is working and operating at the time of listing, same with your city sewer system, because some properties are not even connected to a city water or sewer. Some people have well or septic tanks. So you have to check yes, no, unknown, or not available. Your central air, if the air conditioning is working. So that's pretty much this section. This is appliances, systems, and services. The next section asks more questions about the property condition and improvements and additional information. So about the basement and crawl space, it asks, has there ever been evidence of water? Now, you can interpret this one way, the buyer can interpret this something different. So let's say it says, has there ever been evidence of water? Let's say you had a pipe leak and it leaked onto the basement floor. Now, is that a basement leak? There's evidence of water there, but technically it's a plumbing leak, not a basement leak. Again, people will interpret that different. So it asks you a simple yes or no. You answer yes or no but it also gives you room here to explain what was the cause and was it repaired and things of that nature. So you would want to complete that as accurately as possible. So evidence of water can mean storm backup or sewage backup, or there's a crack in the wall, or maybe you got some seepage, maybe you got bad grading around the perimeter of the property, maybe there's some issues with the gutters and downspouts, and you got a grading problem and you're getting some water seepage. Maybe it only happens when it's heavy rains, or maybe it only happened once in the past 20 years since you've been there. You want to answer this truthfully. Yes, there was evidence of water 15 years ago. This item was corrected or whatever, or basement was waterproof. Whatever that issue is, answer it correctly. Insulation. They want to know, they want you to describe the type of installation that you have. If there's formaldehyde insulation in the property, you want to check yes, no, or unknown. And to be honest, most people don't know what type of insulation is in their home if they never actually had any type of insulation blown into the property or installed. So let's say you brought the home 15 years ago, you had it inspected, you wasn't concerned about the insulation, or the inspector didn't bring it up. 15 years later, you're selling the property, and here you are answering the question about insulation in your home. You have no idea. Unknown is fine. It is fine to um, discuss insulation and just check it as unknown if you honestly don't know. That's why that option is there. They ask you about your well. If you have well water, they're going to ask, has it been tested? Septic tanks, they're going to want to know about your heating system. Is it forced air? Is it boiler, steam, electric? And is it working? Plumbing system, do you have copper, galvanized, or other? And has there been any known problems with the plumbing? Electrical system, you see that here. Any known problems? History of infestation. So this can mean rodents, carpenter ants, any type of wood destroying insects, termites, or anything like that. But infestation can mean pretty much any pest that can have any type of that can cause damage to the property. Now, you may interpret it as that. Somebody else may interpret it as any infestation. It could have been a beehive, right? So again, you want to answer this as truthfully as possible. Any environmental issues with the property? Again, this can be asbestos, because a lot of people have those floor tiles in their basement that has asbestos. Maybe they crack siding. People had asbestos siding on their properties. Any chemical storage tanks or anything like that stored on the property. So that's basically what they're asking there. Flood insurance. Do you currently have flood insurance? Some people have flood insurance if they're in a flood zone. You want to disclose this to the buyer because maybe the buyer didn't do research and they want to know if it was required by your lender that you have flood insurance, because the buyer's probably going to run into that problem as well. Do you own a mineral rights? Now, most residential areas, to be honest, most people don't know. But in some areas where you buy land, that maybe you're buying the land and there are certain restrictions in the deed, or certain ways the contracts were drafted where you don't own the mineral rights to the property. Maybe your property shares a lot or something like that. It's a number of things that can come up that you as the homeowner may not know. And that's again why you can check unknown. You only check yes if you are 100% for certain that you know the answer is yes. No if you know for sure it's not, and unknown if you're not sure. A lot of investors buy properties sight unseen. They fix them and flip them, and their knowledge is based on the renovations that they've done to the property. They don't know what happened to that property 10 years ago, right? So you want to answer this accordingly. Features, other items here. So items shared in common with other landowners. Maybe there's a fence or water share, a shared driveway. Any encroachments or easements or zoning violations, or any non-conforming uses. Maybe someone built an addition, or a storage facility in the back or something like that. And keep in mind, there's different types of setups for residential properties. So this is mainly for 1 to 4 unit properties. But um, when you get like a residential structure, a home, single family home, and someone built like a barn or something in the back or something like that, that's where some of these other items may come into play. Is there any common areas like pools or anything like that? This is when you're getting into more or less your condos and co-ops. Any structural modifications or repairs done without the required permits, right, by licensed contractors. So basically, what they're asking is, did you do an addition to the property and you didn't pull the required permits? Because once the buyer closes, now they're assuming responsibility of that property. And if you didn't disclose that, hey, this was done, but there was no permits pulled, the city comes out a year or two later to assess the property and say, hey, where did this garage come from? Right now, you have an issue because the buyer's going to be on the hook for that, and the buyer's going to come back and possibly sue you. Any settling or flood or drainage, structural or grading problems. That goes back to a little bit of what we discussed about the water in the basement. Major damage to the property from fire, wind, floods, or anything like that. They just want to know, maybe there was a fire, you had to pull a fire permit, renovate the property. The buyers need to know. One thing, most people say, hey, if the house was completely redone by professionals, why does it matter? Well, the reason it matters because it can be something like it can impact the buyer's insurance. The insurance rate may go up, premium may go up based on this property having a history of either fire damage or flooding or something of that nature. So yeah, it's important to know that. Any underground storage tanks? Is there a farm or farm operation in the vicinity, or any shooting ranges or airports within the vicinity? This is important to know. Now, I get it. You're like, if there's a farm in the area or there's an airport, of course the buyer should know, right? But you have to put yourself in the buyer's shoes. Maybe the buyer just relocated here. And, you're probably thinking, oh, they can just Google this, right? They're looking up the address and they say, hey, there's a landfill, a quarter mile away or airport. I don't have to disclose that. Yes, you do. It's right here. So disclose it if you know about it. And then the buyer can make a educated decision on what's going on. Now, again, you don't know if it's a shooting range, in a vicinity because you probably never, you know, you never went to the shooting range. You don't know anything about it. Maybe it's an indoor shooting range. If you don't know, check unknown. But if you know for certain, check yes. If you don't know, check no. If you're not for sure, check unknown. Right. Any outstanding municipal assessments or fees. So this is not just property taxes or anything like that. There's assessments that can be assessed to a property, but not actually billed until several months later. But the homeowner has received notice about these assessments several months in advance. So maybe they're doing paving the roads or doing new sidewalks, and there's an assessment sign, but it hasn't been recorded and added as a lien against the property as of this date that you're listing the property. So the buyers need to know about that. Any pending litigation that can affect the property, that can affect the property and the seller's right to convey title. So pretty much, are you in bankruptcy? Is there any federal tax liens or anything like that? Are you currently going through a divorce? Because maybe you're planning on selling the property, but you can't actually sell and close because you have other things going on. Any litigation is going on can impact the sale of the property, where a third party can come and say, hey, you can't go through with the sale until we settle this, or you may be at risk of losing the property to this third party. And this doesn't mean like it's in foreclosure, because in foreclosure, You just have to pay off the balance. This means something like maybe you're going through a divorce, you're trying to sell the property, but wait a minute, you're not even entitled to the property, or you don't know the outcome of that. So that's something you have to be mindful of. All right. And then it gives you some information at the bottom to explain, um, if there's anything else that you would like to add, or if you answered yes to anything, you can put that information here. You can also add an addendum, say, and if you something is too long to explain on this form, you can actually add it on an addendum. Again, speak with your realtor or your attorney to discuss that in detail. Then it's going to ask you how long you lived in the property. So from what date to what date, and how long have you owned the property? Some people are like, well, that's common sense. If I've lived here for 10 years, that means I've owned it for 10 years. No, it doesn't mean that, because some people were renting their home, or maybe some people grew up in the property, but they didn't own it. Maybe the property was passed down to them, and vice versa. Some people um, owned the property, but they never lived in it, like investors. So you want to read this, it's night and day, it's black and white. Answer yes, no, or unknown. Simple as that. Don't try to get creative with it. Don't try to be, if you can't answer yes, the answer is no or unknown. Now, I want to talk to my investor clients, and any of you investors out there. The biggest mistake most investors make, and I don't know who's advising you to do this, especially investors who have owned the property for a long period of time as a rental property, or even some investors that are buying and flipping a property. You will see investors take this form and write a big unknown on across here, just across the top of everything. Or they'll say something like, unknown seller has never lived in the property. Now, that's fine. The buyer may accept that. The buyer may even close with that. But guess what's going to happen once that buyer has an issue with the property? They're going to call an attorney. And an attorney's going to say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller or investor, how long have you owned this property? And you've owned it, say, for 4, 5, 10 years, and you've been renting that property. So the attorney is going to ask you something simple. So you've owned this property as a rental property, and I'm pretty sure you've done some repairs, because your property manager records show this. You've done all the city inspection repairs that were required. So it's almost impossible for you to not know anything about a property that you own for 4 or 5 years. So, for example, now, maybe the tenant didn't disclose something to you, but I'm pretty sure if you had a roof leak, you would have known about it in the past 4 or 5 years. Yes or no, right? So for you to just put unknown on everything, that's putting you a little bit more at risk. So think about that. If you purchase and flip this property, right? And you're in the process, and you completely renovated this property, and it asks you any roof leaks and approximate age if known, and you just put unknown. Well, you just put in your description when you were bragging to the buyer that it's a new roof on the property. So why wouldn't you put the year you put the roof on the property is brand new? Your advertisement says new roof, but your seller disclosure says unknown. It doesn't add up. My advice is to complete this form to the best of your ability. So, again, in conclusion, the seller's disclosure form as a seller is actually here to protect you and to prevent you from going to court over frivolous lawsuits. But people can sue you regardless. That doesn't mean they're going to win. But without this form, you can be at great risk, because you were supposed to have it according to our state law here in Michigan. And two, you can tell a buyer, hey, I've already disclosed everything wrong with this property, plus you had your inspections. Now, as a buyer, the buyer you as a buyer, you get to read this and say, hey, I want to move forward or I don't, or I want to make sure I address these items in my inspection. This is Reginald Perryman, regisrealestate.com. Contact me anytime if you have questions, and comment below if you think this video was helpful. Thank you.